Welcome to Midnight Ember Studios.
The glass shattered before Neko felt it break. Across the bar, Sung Ho's fingers lingered on Byeol's wrist. 1 second, two, three. The kind of touch that was either intimate or territorial, and to Neko, they were the same thing. Blood dripped from his palm onto the white tablecloth. He didn't feel the cuts. He felt nothing but the slow, deliberate beat of rage in his chest. Stand up, cross the room, break his fingers, break his face, break every bone in the hand that touched what's mine. The voice in his head was his own, but it sounded like someone else, someone he'd buried years ago, someone who killed first and asked questions when the body was cold. Across the room, Byeol laughed at something Sung Ho said. The sound was warm, unguarded, the laugh of a woman who had no idea she was standing at the edge of a war. Neko forced his fingers open. Glass shards clinked against the table. He couldn't move, because if he crossed that floor, if he showed Sung Ho exactly how deep the wound went, he would have to explain why. And the truth, the secret buried so deep even Byeol didn't know it existed, would destroy her more than any rival syndicate ever could. So he sat, he bled, he watched. And when Byeol finally looked across the room and met his eyes, she smiled. A real smile. The smile she gave only him. Neko didn't smile back, because in that smile, he saw everything he was about to lose. 3 years ago. Neko was 29 years old, and he had spent the evening cleaning up a problem for Director Kang. That was the word they used. Problem. Never a person, never a life. A problem that needed to be solved, and Neko was the solution. He didn't remember the drive to the bakery. He didn't remember parking the car or stepping into the rain. What he remembered was the light. A small shop on a narrow street, warm amber glowing through fogged windows. The sign read, Byeol's Bakery, in handwritten Korean, and beneath it, in smaller letters, made from scratch, like love should be. Neko stood in the rain for a full minute before he opened the door. The woman behind the counter was small, petite, delicate with dark hair pulled back from a face that should have been too tired to smile. She had worked 14 hours. He could see it in the shadows under her eyes, in the flour dusted across her apron like snow. But when she looked up and saw him, a tall man in a soaked black suit, rain dripping from his jaw, the kind of face that made people cross the street, she smiled. Oh, you're soaked. Here, wait, I have something. She disappeared into the back before he could respond. Neko stood in the doorway, water pooling at his feet, and tried to remember the last time someone had looked at him without fear. She returned with a small box tied with twine. For you, she said, on the house. You look like you need something sweet. Neko looked at the box, then at her, then at the empty bakery, the worn tables, the handwritten menu on a chalkboard that suggested this place was barely surviving. I don't need charity, he said. Her smile didn't waver. It's not charity, it's a gift. There's a difference. She pressed the box into his hands. Her fingers were warm, calloused from kneading dough. She smelled like vanilla and sugar and something else, something that made the hollow space in his chest ache in a way he didn't recognize. He bought every pastry in the case. She laughed when he laid the cash on the counter, far more than the pastries were worth, far more than she probably made in a week. I can't take this, she said. You can. I don't even know your name. Good. That's better for both of us. He left before she could argue, but at the door, he turned back. She was standing behind the counter, the stack of cash still in her hands, looking after him with an expression that wasn't fear. It was curiosity. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, Neko wanted someone to know his name. 6 months. 6 months of finding reasons to pass by the bakery. 6 months of late-night stops when the city was sleeping and the world was quiet. 6 months of watching her from across the street, telling himself it was protection, telling himself he was just making sure she was safe. She learned his coffee order before she learned his name. Black, no sugar. You're the easiest customer I have. He told her his name on a Tuesday. She was closing up, wiping down the counter, and he was standing in the doorway the way he always did. Half in, half out, one foot still in the rain. Neko, he repeated, testing the sound. That's unusual. It's a nickname. What's your real name? He paused. No one had asked him that in years. It doesn't matter, he said. Neko is who I am now. She accepted that the way she accepted everything about him, without pushing, without fear, without the questions that would have unraveled him if she'd asked. Instead, she asked other things: what music he liked, whether he preferred sweet or savory, what made him smile. He didn't have an answer for that last one, not until her. But Neko couldn't stay on the other side of the door forever. When her landlord raised the rent, triple what she could pay, Neko bought the building. He did it through a shell company, through a name she wouldn't recognize, through the kind of money that came from the kind of work he did. She never knew. She thought she was lucky. When a customer got too familiar, a man who lingered too long, touched her hand, made her uncomfortable, Neko handled it. Not with violence, not where she could see, just a conversation, a quiet word. The man never came back. She thought the problem had solved itself. Neko told himself he was protecting her, but protection didn't require him to sit in his car outside her apartment at night. Protection didn't require him to memorize her schedule, her habits, the way she hummed when she thought no one was listening. It wasn't protection anymore. It was obsession. And Neko, who never wanted anything he couldn't take, had finally found something he didn't know how to possess without destroying. He asked her on a Thursday. The bakery was empty. She was closing up. Same as always, wiping down the counter, turning off the lights, but this time, when she reached for the door, she found him on one knee in the middle of the floor. She gasped, dropped her keys, stared at him with eyes so wide he could see himself reflected in them. A man on his knees, a man who never knelt for anyone, asking for something he didn't deserve. I don't have a ring yet, he said. I wanted to get you something specific, something that means something, but I didn't want to wait anymore. She didn't move, didn't speak. He watched her hands tremble at their sides. I'm not a good man, he continued. The words came harder than any confession he'd ever made. I've done things I can't undo, things I can't tell you, but when I'm with you. He stopped, swallowed, forced himself to look at her, really look at her, the way he'd been afraid to look for 6 months. When I'm with you, he said, I want to be better. I don't know if I can be, but I want to try. Byeol knelt beneath him. Her hands cupped his face, and he flinched, not from pain, but from the tenderness of it. Her fingers were warm, calloused from kneading dough, and they fit against his jaw like they were made for him. Yes, she whispered. He almost didn't hear her. Yes, she said louder. I don't care what you've done. I care about who you are now, who you are with me. He kissed her, right there on the floor of the bakery, surrounded by the smell of vanilla and sugar and something new, something that tasted like a future he never thought he'd have. She didn't know what kind of man she'd said yes to. She didn't know about the blood, the violence, the nights he'd spent erasing problems for Director Kang. She didn't know, and Neko swore to himself in that moment that she never would. Present day. The apartment was a space that shouldn't exist. Soft lighting, fresh flowers on the table. She changed them every 3 days. Always white, always simple. Warm wood floors, books stacked on the coffee table, a kitchen that smelled of garlic and sesame, even when she wasn't cooking. Neko walked through the door at 11:43. He was always precise, always measured. He removed his jacket before he touched anything, hanging it on the hook by the entrance. Outside him, inside him, never the two meeting. "You're late," Byeol called from the kitchen. "Work." She appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. She still wore aprons, even though she didn't work at the bakery anymore. She said they reminded her of who she was before. "I made dinner 2 hours ago. It's cold. I'll heat it up. You'll burn it." He almost smiled. Almost. She crossed the room and took his hand, the one that shattered a glass across a bar cable weeks ago, though she didn't know that. Her fingers traced the healing cuts on his palm. What happened? Broke a glass? She looked at him for a long moment, searching, the way she sometimes looked at him, as if she could see through the careful walls he'd built. "You should be more careful," she said. She didn't ask where he'd been. She'd stopped asking 6 months ago. Neko's world existed in 2 parts. The apartment was one. Soft. Do you think Nekos should have any reason to suspect Park Byeol? If you are enjoying the story, like, subscribe, and share. Warm. Byeol's domain. The other was Director Kang's. Director Kang had run Seoul's underground for 20 years. He was a small man, unassuming in his tailored suits and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like a retired professor. He had the body count of a general. Neko was his most trusted weapon. "Any news?" Kang asked. They sat in Kang's office, a penthouse overlooking the Han River, all glass and steel and silence. Neko stood by the window, watching the city lights reflect on the water. "Sung-ho is making moves," Neko said. "2 of our warehouses, small things, testing." Kang's expression didn't change. "And the woman?" Neko's jaw tightened. He knew Kang meant Byeol. "She's fine. You're bringing her to the gala next week." It wasn't a question. "She doesn't belong there." "She belongs wherever you are," King said. "That's the point. You show her off. You remind everyone that the man beside you has something they don't. It's power, Neko. Use it." Neko said nothing. Kang leaned back in his chair, studying him with the same cold calculation he applied to everything. "You've changed since her." "I'm still the same." "No, you're softer, distracted. I see it in your work." Neko's voice went flat. "My work hasn't suffered." "Not yet," Kang said. "But Sung-ho is watching. He's been quiet too long. A man like Sung-ho doesn't go quiet unless he's planning something." He let the words hang in the air. "When he makes his move," Kang continued, "I need you to be the man I trained, not the man who buys flowers and comes home for dinner." Neko met his gaze. "I know what I am." "Good. Don't forget." On the drive home, Neko replayed Kang's words. Sung-ho is watching. He'd heard the name before. Park Sung-ho, head of the Nam-gil syndicate. A rival. A ghost. A man who had built his empire in the shadows while Kang built his in the light. They'd never crossed paths directly. Territory, respect, a careful balance that had held for years. But balance never lasted. Neko pulled into the parking garage beneath their building. He sat in the car for a long moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Sung-ho is watching. He thought about the apartment upstairs, the warm lights, the fresh flowers, the woman who was probably asleep by now, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her face soft and unguarded. He thought about what he would do to keep her safe. And he thought about what he was willing to become if it came to that. The grand hall of the Sheila Hotel glittered with crystal chandeliers and the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Men in tailored suits, women in gowns that cost more than most people's rent. Champagne flowing, deals being made, alliances forged over caviar and small talk. Neko hated it. He stood near the back of the room, a glass of whiskey in his hand, watching the crowd with the same cold calculation he'd used to read a room full of enemies. But his attention wasn't on the room. It was on her. Byeol stood by the bar, accepting a glass of champagne from a waiter. She was nervous. He could see it in the way she held her shoulders, the way her fingers curled around the stem of the glass. She didn't belong here, but God, she was beautiful. Her gown was deep green, the color of moss in an old forest. It fell to her ankles, simple in design, but elegant in the way it moved with her. Her dark hair was swept back from her face, and around her neck was the necklace he'd given her for their engagement, a single pearl, small and unassuming, the kind of thing that meant nothing to anyone but her. She caught his eye across the room, smiled, the smile that was only for him. He didn't smile back, not because he didn't want to, because smiling in this room was a weakness, and every weakness was a weapon someone else could use. But he moved toward her, always toward her. "You're doing fine," he said, taking her hand. "I hate these things," she murmured. "I know. Everyone keeps looking at me." He glanced around the room. Men, women, it didn't matter. Anyone who looked at her too long earned a catalog in his mind, a face, a name if he knew it, a calculation of threat. "They're looking because you're beautiful," he said. "Let them look." She squeezed his hand. "Neko." "What?" "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Looking at everyone like you're going to kill them." He almost smiled. Almost. "That's just my face." She laughed, the warm, unguarded laugh that made his chest ache. "Your face is going to get us kicked out." He pulled her closer, his hand settling on the small of her back. A claim, a reminder. To her, to the room, to every man who might be watching. "Let them try," he said. "Neko." The voice came from behind him. Neko turned, his hand still on Byeol's back, every instinct suddenly alert. Park Sung-ho stood 3 feet away. He was older than Neko expected, silver at the temples, a face that might have been handsome if it weren't for the coldness behind his eyes. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly fitted, and his smile was the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. "You're Director Kang's right hand," Sung-ho said, extending his hand. "I've heard a great deal about you." Neko didn't take the hand. "I don't shake." Sung-ho's smile didn't waver. He let his hand drop, his gaze sliding toward Byeol. "And this must be the famous fiancé." Byeol's hand tightened on Neko's. She felt it too, the wrongness of this man, the way his attention settled on her like something heavy. "I'm Park Byeol," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. "Park," Sung-ho repeated. "A coincidence. I'm Park as well. Perhaps we're distant cousins." Neko's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Sung-ho?" "I'm here for the same reason everyone is here. Business, pleasure." His gaze returned to Byeol. "Your fiancé is lovely. I hope you know what you have." Neko's voice was ice. "I know exactly what I have." Sung-ho inclined his hand. "Then you'll forgive me if I say, treasure it. Not everyone gets a second chance." The words landed like a blade. Neko went still, completely still, the stillness of a predator deciding whether to strike. Sung-ho held his gaze for a long, deliberate moment. Then he turned to Byeol and his expression softened into something almost kind. "May I give you some advice?" he asked. She didn't answer. "Hold on to him," Sung-ho said. "Men like Neko don't love often. When they do, well, it's a beautiful thing to witness." Sung-ho stepped closer to Byeol, too close, close enough that Neko's hand twitched toward the concealed weapon beneath his jacket. But Sung-ho wasn't looking at Neko. He leaned down, his lips almost brushing Byeol's ear, and whispered something Neko couldn't hear. It lasted 3 seconds, 3 seconds that stretched into an eternity. Byeol went pale. Sung-ho straightened, smiled at Neko. "A pleasure meeting you both." He disappeared into the crowd before Neko could move. Neko grabbed Byeol's arm, not gruffly, but urgently. "What did he say?" She blinked. Her face was pale, her eyes unfocused. "Byeol." His voice was harder now. What did he say? She looked at him. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. Fear, confusion, something he couldn't name. Then she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Nothing, she said. Just nothing important. Neko knew she was lying. He spent his life reading people, reading threats, reading the spaces between words where truth lived. She was lying. What did he say? He asked again, quieter this time, more dangerous. Nothing, she repeated. He said my dress was beautiful, that's all. The lie settled between them like a wall. Neko didn't push, not here, not now, but his hand tightened on her arm, and when he looked across the ballroom, searching for Sung-ho's silver hair, he found nothing but strangers. The man was gone, and whatever he'd whispered to Byeol was still in her eyes, still pale and present, still something she wouldn't share. 3 days ago, Neko brought his fiancée Byeol to a charity gala. There, rival syndicate leader Park Sung-ho whispered something in her ear, something that made her pale, something she refuses to repeat. Byeol lied to Neko for the first time, and Neko, who has spent his life reading threats in the spaces between words, now finds himself reading the woman he loves. The cracks are forming. 3 days since the gala, 3 days since Sung-ho's lips brushed Byeol's ear, 3 days since she smiled and said nothing, and Neko watched something shift behind her eyes. 3 days, and the apartment had become a different place. Neko sat in the dark living room, watching the rain trace past down the window. His phone buzzed on the table, reports from his men, updates on Sung-ho's movements. Nothing useful. He didn't pick it up. Behind him, the bedroom door was closed. Byeol had been sleeping badly, tossing, turning, waking in the night to stare at the ceiling. This morning, she'd left for her sister without waking him,
Please like, subscribe, and comment.
without leaving a note. He didn't turn when she came in. He could track her by sound, the soft pad of her feet on the hardwood, the pause when she saw him sitting in the dark, the careful way she set her keys in the bowl by the door. Neko. He didn't answer. You've been sitting there all day? Working. She moved into his peripheral vision. He saw her hands, clasped in front of her, knuckles white. You haven't eaten. Not hungry. Another silence. The kind of silence that used to be comfortable between them, the kind that meant they didn't need words. Now it was different. Now it was a wall. Byeol sat on the arm of the couch, close enough to touch, far enough to escape. You're angry, she said. No. You haven't looked at me in 3 days. He turned, looked at her, really looked, the shadows under her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers twisted in her lap. I'm looking now. She met his gaze, held it. For a moment, something passed between them, the old warmth, the connection that had always been there, even in the silences. Then she looked away first. Neko, what did he say to you? The question came out harder than he intended. He saw her flinch, just slightly, and something in his chest tightened. Byeol stood up, put distance between them. We've been over this. No, you've been lying about it. There's a difference. Her voice sharpened. I'm not lying. You told me he said your dress was beautiful. That's not what he said. I know it's not what he said. How do you know? You were across the room. You couldn't hear anything. I know people, Byeol. I know when someone is feeding me a story. She laughed. It was bitter, sharp, nothing like the warm laugh that had first drawn to her. Of course you know people. You know threats, you know enemies. You know how to read a room like a battlefield. But you don't know how to trust me, do you? Neko's jaw tightened. This isn't about trust. This is exactly about trust. Her voice rose. You've had your men watching me. You check my phone, you track my location. I know, Neko. I've always known. The words hung in the air between them. Neko went still. That particular stillness, the one that preceded violence, But there was no enemy here. There was only Byeol, her chest heaving, her eyes bright with something that might have been tears or might have been rage. "You think I don't notice?" she continued, her voice cracking. "You think I don't see the same car parked outside my sister's apartment, the same man at the cafe every morning pretending to read a newspaper? I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" She stepped closer. "From a man who talked to me about pastries? From a stranger at a party who said something I didn't understand?" "What did he say?" "Nothing. He said nothing that matters. And even if he did, even if he told me every secret you've ever kept, I would tell you, because that's what people who trust each other do." Neko looked at her, really looked. And for a moment, just a moment, he almost told her the truth about Sung-ho, the truth about the woman who died, the truth about the secret buried so deep he'd convinced himself it didn't exist. But the words wouldn't come, because if he told her, she would look at him differently, the way she was looking at him now, not with love, but with fear. And Neko couldn't bear it. Sung-ho isn't just a man who talks about pastries. He's the head of a rival syndicate. He's dangerous, and he was watching you the same way he'd watch anything that belongs to someone he wants to destroy. Byeol's expression flickered. "Belongs to? You know what I mean." "I know exactly what you mean." Her voice was cold now. "I'm not a thing you own, Neko. I'm not a territory you protect. I never said you were. You didn't have to." She turned away, walked to the window, her back to him. The rain had stopped. The city below was a wash of neon and shadow. "I didn't tell you what Sung-ho said because it was strange, and I didn't want to make you angry." Neko moved to stand behind her, not touching, just there. "What did he say?" She was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "He said, you don't know who he was before you. Ask him about Yoon-jia. See if he tells you the truth." Neko's heart stopped. The name, 3 years buried, 3 years of pretending it didn't exist, 3 years of building a life on top of a grave. Byeol turned to face him. "Who is Yoon-jia?" Neko's throat closed. His hands, steady through every fight he'd ever fought, trembled at his sides. "I don't—" He stopped, swallowed. "It's nothing. Someone before." "Before what?" "Before you." She searched his face, waiting, hoping, maybe, that he would finally tell her the truth. He couldn't. "Old business, nothing that concerns you." Her expression shuddered. The hope faded, replaced with something harder. "I see," she said. Neko stood alone in the living room, the name still burning in his chest. Yoon-jia. Yoon-jia. Sung-ho knew. Somehow Sung-ho knew everything, and now Byeol knew the name. The next morning, Byeol went to her favorite cafe. She told herself it was routine, the same cafe she'd been going to for years, the one with the good croissants and the barista who knew her order. She told herself she needed space, a few hours away from the apartment, away from Neko's silence, away from the weight of a name she didn't understand. But when she walked through the door, Park Sung-ho was already there. He sat at her usual table, a cup of tea in front of him, a newspaper folded beside his plate. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was the same as it had been at the gala. Polished, warm, wrong. "Miss Park," he said, "what a coincidence." Byeol stopped in the doorway. Every instinct told her to leave, but her feet wouldn't move. "I come here every morning," he continued. "Best croissants in the district, though I suspect you already know that." Byeol forced herself to move. She walked to the counter, ordered her coffee, kept her back to him. Her hands were shaking. She didn't know if it was fear or anger. "I owe you an apology," Sung-ho said. She turned. He was standing beside her, close enough that she could see the lines at the corners of his eyes, the gray in his hair. He looked older up close, tired maybe, or patient. She couldn't tell. "My comment at the gala was inappropriate. I shouldn't have put you in that position." "You shouldn't have said anything at all." No, but I did. He inclined his head. Can I buy you a coffee, as an apology? The barista placed her coffee on the counter. Byeol picked it up, her hands wrapped around the warm cup like armor. I already have one. Then sit with me for 5 minutes. I won't keep you longer than that. She should have said no. Every part of her knew she should say no. But curiosity was a poison, and Sung-ho had planted it 3 days ago, and now it was growing inside her. She sat. Thank you, he said. I know you have no reason to trust me. I don't. Good. Then we're starting with honesty. He folded his hands on the table. What did you think of what I said about Neko? Byeol's grip tightened on her cup. I think it's none of your business. Fair, but you asked him, didn't you, about Yoon-jia? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence was answer enough. Sung-ho's expression softened into something that might have been sympathy. He didn't tell you. I thought he might not. Who is she? The question came out before she could stop it. She heard the need in her own voice, the hunger for truth that had been gnawing at her for 3 days. Sung-ho picked up his teacup, took a slow, deliberate sip. She was someone I loved, he said. Someone Neko took from me. Byeol's blood go cold. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, Sung-ho continued. I'm telling you because you deserve to know who you're marrying. Neko is a good man, or he was, but good men do terrible things when they're following orders. What did he do? Sung-ho set down his cup, met her eyes. He killed her. Byeol's world tilted. She heard the words. She understood them, but they didn't fit. They couldn't fit, not with the man who buys her flowers every week, not with the man who holds her when she can't sleep, not with the man who looks at her like she's the only light in a world of darkness. You're lying, she whispered. I'm not lying. Neko wouldn't. He didn't pull the trigger himself, Sung-ho said. That's not his way. He's too clean for that. But he delivered her to the men who did. He knew what would happen. He signed the report afterward. His name, his handwriting, his work. He reached into his jacket. Byeol flinched, but he only pulled out a folded photograph. He laid it on the table between them. A woman, young, dark hair, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Beside her, a younger Neko, harder, colder, but the same face, the same jaw, the same hands. She was 24, Sung-ho said. She worked for me. Neko's people found her. They used her to get to me. When she had no more value, he spread his hands. They disposed of her. Byeol pushed back from the table. The chair scraped against the floor, loud in the quiet cafe. Why are you telling me this? She demanded. What do you want from me? Sung-ho remained seated, calm, patient. I want you to know the truth, he said. What you do with that is your choice. Byeol grabbed her coffee. Her hands were shaking so badly the liquid sloshed over the rim. You're trying to hurt him, she said. Through me. Sung-ho's smile didn't waver. I'm trying to give you the gift of clarity. Neko has built your life on a foundation of lies. I'm simply pointing at the cracks. He stood, reached into his jacket again, and this time he withdrew a business card. He placed it on the table beside the photograph. When you're ready for more, he said, call me. He walked out of the cafe without looking back. Byeol stood there for a long time, the photograph burning into her memory, the name repeating in her skull like a prayer or a curse. Yoon-jia, Yoon-jia, Yoon-jia. Neko sat in his car, watching the cafe entrance. He'd been there for 3 hours. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. The engine was off, the windows tinted, the car invisible in the early morning shadows. He watched Byeol enter the cafe at 8:15. He watched her freeze when she saw Sung-ho already inside. He watched her hesitate at the counter, her back rigid, her hands shaking. And he watched her sit down at his table. His hands gripped the steering wheel. The leather creaked under his fingers. Sit, wait, watch. She was talking to Sung-ho, leaning forward. Her expression was something he'd never seen before. Hungry, desperate, the face of a woman searching for something she couldn't find. She was asking about Yoon Ji-ah. He knew because he'd had the cafe wired for months. Every table, every conversation, every word that passed between his fiancée and a man who wanted to destroy him. The earpiece in his ear crackled. He heard Byeol's voice, small and shaking. What did he do? He heard Sung-ho's answer. He killed her. He didn't feel the pain. He didn't feel anything but rage. Cold, clean, absolute. The rage he'd buried 3 years ago. The rage he'd thought he'd left behind when Byeol said yes. It was still there, waiting. Get me everything on Sung-ho. Every file, every photograph, every secret he's ever buried. I want to know where he sleeps, who he fucks, what he eats for breakfast, and I want it by tonight. A pause. His man on the other end, probably afraid to speak. Yes, boss. Neko watched Byeol leave the cafe, watched her walk down the street, her shoulders hunched, her steps uncertain. She passed within 10 feet of his car and didn't see him. He watched her go, and he didn't follow her, because if he followed her now, he would have to talk to her, and if he talked to her, he would have to answer her questions, and if he answered her questions, he wasn't ready to lose her. Not yet. I'm back. Neko stood in the kitchen. The apartment was clean, spotless even. He'd spent the afternoon cleaning, scrubbing counters, polishing glass, anything to keep his hands busy. He turned. Byeol was in the doorway, her coat still on, her face pale. She looked at him the way she might look at a stranger, cautious, uncertain. How was your morning? He asked. Fine. Coffee? I went to the cafe, the usual. He nodded, poured her a cup of tea. She didn't drink coffee afternoon, he knew that. He always knew that, and set it on the counter. She didn't move to take it. Neko, who were you with? The question dropped between them like a stone. He saw her freeze, saw the flicker of panic in her eyes before she controlled it. What? You heard me. His voice was calm, too calm, the calm of a man who already knows the answer. You went to the cafe, you sat with someone. Who was it? Byeol's hands tightened at her sides. You were watching me. I was making sure you were safe. You were watching me. Who were you with, Byeol? She didn't answer. He watched her struggle with it, a lie forming on her lips, the truth she didn't want to tell. He'd seen the same struggle 100 times, in enemies, in informants, in people who knew the truth would destroy them. No one, she said. I was alone. Don't. Neko, don't lie to me. His voice rose. He heard it, felt the rage bleeding through, couldn't stop it. I saw you. I saw him. Park Sung-ho sat at your table for 20 minutes. He gave you something, a photograph. You looked at it like it was a death sentence. Byeol's face went white. You were watching me. The whole time? I was protecting you. You were spying on me. Her voice cracked. You put cameras in my cafe. You tracked my phone. You sat in a car outside like I'm a criminal you're investigating. You're not a criminal. You're my fiancé, and you're sitting across from a man who wants to destroy everything I've built. I was sitting across from a man who told me the truth. The room went very, very quiet. Neko stared at her. She stared back, her chest heaving, her eyes bright with tears she was fighting not to shed. The truth. His voice was barely a whisper. What truth? Byeol laughed. It was a broken sound, nothing like the laugh that had first drawn her to her. Who is Yoon Ji-ah, Neko? Did Sung-ho tell you to ask me that? He told me you killed her. Neko's world stopped. He heard the words. He understood them, but they didn't fit. They couldn't fit. Not in this kitchen, with the fresh flowers on the table, with the woman he loved looking at him like he was a monster. You don't know what you're talking about, he said. Then tell me. She stepped closer. Her voice broke. Please, Neko, tell me the truth. Tell me he's lying. Tell me you didn't... I didn't kill her. The words came out harder than he intended. Byeol flinched. I didn't kill her, he repeated, quieter now. But I was there, and she died, and I've spent 3 years trying to forget it ever happened. Why didn't you tell me? How could I? He moved toward her. She didn't retreat, but she didn't move closer either. She stood frozen, her hands pressed against her stomach like she was holding herself together. What was I supposed to say? Before we got married, let me tell you about the woman I failed to save. You should have trusted me. I was trying to protect you. From what? From knowing who you really are? Neko stopped. Her words hit something deep, something he'd been trying to bury for years. I know who I am, he said quietly. I've always known. Then let me know too. She reached for his hand. He let her take it, let her fingers trace the scars on his palm. I love you. I chose you. But I can't choose you if I don't know who you are. You knew who I was when you said yes. I knew the version of you that you let me see. I knew the man who buys me flowers and comes home late and doesn't talk about his work. But I didn't know. She stopped, swallowed. I didn't know you'd been with someone else, that you'd lost someone, that you'd... She wasn't mine. The words came out raw, honest, the first honest thing he'd said in 3 years. Yoon Ji-ah was a handler. She worked for Sung-ho. She was feeding him information. When we found out, Director Kang gave me the order to bring her in. He closed his eyes. I gave her a chance to run. She didn't take it. Byeol's hand tightened on his. What happened? She chose to stay. She chose to die rather than face Sung-ho's punishment for her failure. He opened his eyes, looked at her. I didn't kill her, but I couldn't save her either, and Sung-ho has been waiting for 3 years to make me pay for it. Byeol stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes were wet, her face pale, but she didn't pull away. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because I was afraid. The admission cost him more than any confession he'd ever made. I was afraid you'd look at me the way you're looking at me now. She blinked. Tears slipped down her cheeks. How am I looking at you? Like you don't know if I can trust you. She pulled her hand away. Neko felt the loss like a physical wound. I need time, she said. I need to think. Byeol, I'm not leaving, she stepped back, put distance between them. I'm not giving up on us, but I need to understand. I need to know who you are, all of you. She walked to the bedroom. At the door, she paused. I love you, but love isn't enough if you won't let me see you. The door closed. Neko stood alone in the kitchen, the fresh flowers on the table, the tea going cold, the ghost of a woman he couldn't save between him and the woman he was losing. 3 hours later, Neko found her in the living room. She was sitting on the couch, a book open in her lap, but she wasn't reading. She was staring at the wall, her face blank, her hands still. He sat beside her, not touching, just there. I'm sorry, he said. She didn't respond. I should have told you. About Jia, about everything. Why didn't you? Because I wanted to be someone else with you, someone who hadn't done the things I've done, someone who deserved you. She turned to look at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face tired, but there was something in her expression he hadn't seen since the gala, something soft. I don't need you to be someone else, she said. I just need you to be honest with me. Can you do that? He wanted to say yes. He wanted to promise her honesty, transparency, everything she deserved. But Sung-ho was still out there. The secret of Jia was only the beginning, and there were things Neko had done, things he would never tell her, things that would destroy her if she knew. I can try, he said. It wasn't the answer she wanted. He saw that in the way her expression flickered, the hope dimming. But she nodded. Okay, she said. Okay. She leaned into him, her head against his shoulder. He wrapped his arm around her, pulled her close, felt the warmth of her body against his. I'm not going to lose you, he thought. I'll do whatever it takes. But even as he made the promise, he knew. The cameras were still there. The surveillance, the obsession that he called protection. He hadn't removed any of it. And Byeol didn't know. It came 2 days later. Byeol was alone in the apartment. Neko was meeting with Director Kang. Something about territory, about Sung-ho's movements, about a war that was coming. She didn't ask for details. She didn't want them. She heard the knock at the door. By the time she reached it, whoever was there was gone. But the envelope was on the floor. She picked it up. It was thick, heavy, unmarked. Her name was written across the front in careful handwriting she didn't recognize. She should have thrown it away. She knew she should have thrown it away. But her fingers were already opening the seal, already pulling out the contents, already spreading them across the coffee table. Photographs, documents, official reports with official seals, a woman's face, Yoon Jia, young and scared, her eyes hollow in a way that made Byeol's stomach turn. She started reading. Sound, Byeol's breath, quickening, pages turning. The file was complete, a timeline of events, a record of Neko's involvement, the mission, the orders, the delivery. She read about how Neko's men had tracked Jia for weeks, how they'd used her family, her friends, her desperate need to protect someone she loved, how they'd offered her a deal, information for safety, and how she'd taken it. She read about the betrayal, how Jia had been feeding information to Sung-ho, yes, but only because Sung-ho had threatened her sister, how Neko had discovered the truth, how he'd reported it to Director Kang. And then she read about the night Jia died. Music. Silence. The words on the page speak for themselves. The order came from Kang. Neko signed it, his handwriting clean and precise, recording the elimination of a traitor. But there was more. A note, handwritten in the margins of the final report. Neko's writing. Subject offered a way out, refused, would rather die than face her handler's punishment. Byeol stared at the words until they blurred. She offered her a way out. Neko had given Jia a chance to run. She hadn't taken it. Why didn't you tell me? She didn't know who she was asking. Neko, who wasn't there. Sung-ho, who sent the file. Herself, who opened the envelope knowing she shouldn't. She read the file twice, 3 times, looking for something, an excuse, an explanation, anything that would make the story fit with the man who held her when she couldn't sleep. But the story was complete, and the man in the file was the same man she loved. She just hadn't known him. The front door opening, keys in a bowl, Neko's voice. Byeol, I'm home. She looked up. He was standing in the doorway, still in his suit, his hair slightly disheveled, his eyes dark with exhaustion, and on the coffee table between them was the file. A sudden, sharp silence, the moment before everything breaks. Neko's eyes moved from her face to the table. He saw the photographs, the documents, the face of a woman who died because he couldn't save her. His expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very, very still. What is this? He asked. Byeol stood. Her legs were shaking, but her voice was steady. Tell me the truth, all of it, right now. Neko's footsteps, slow, deliberate. He moves into the room like a man approaching a bomb. You went through my things. It was delivered here to our apartment while you were gone. His jaw tightened. Sung-ho. I don't care who sent it. I care about what's in it. She picked up the final page, the one with his handwriting in the margins. You offered her a way out. You tried to save her. He didn't answer. You didn't tell me that. Her voice cracked. Why didn't you let me think? Think what? That you killed her. I didn't save her either. Does it matter? Yes, she threw the page down. It matters because it changes everything. You're not the monster he wants me to see. You're someone who tried to do the right thing and couldn't. That's not the same. Neko stared at her. For a moment, something flickered in his expression, something that might have been hope. Then it was gone. It doesn't change anything. She died. I signed the report. I've been carrying that guilt for 3 years, whether I pulled the trigger or not. He looked away. I was there. I let it happen. You didn't let it happen. You couldn't stop it. There's no difference. There's every difference. She crossed the room, took his hands in hers, the same hands that signed a death warrant, the same hands that brought her flowers every week. I'm not going to lose you, she said. I told you that. But you have to stop hiding from me. You have to let me see you, all of you. I don't know how, he admitted. I've been hiding for so long. Then learn. She squeezed his hands. I'll wait, but I can't keep living in the dark. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in 3 years, he let her see the fear behind his eyes. I don't want to lose you. You won't, she smiled. It was small, fragile, but it was real. Not if you stop pushing me away. He pulled her into his arms. She went willingly, her face pressed against his chest, her arms wrapped around his waist. I'm not going to lose you, he thought. I'll do whatever it takes. But even as he made the promise, he knew. The cameras were still there, the surveillance, the obsession that he called protection. He hadn't removed any of it, and Byeol didn't know.